Well, I'm hoping people can see me. If you can see me, if you could, in the live chat, please tell me. I would appreciate it. If there's any audio problems and you could tell me, I would appreciate it. Well, I'm hoping people can see me. Oh, good. You can see me and you can hear me. Okay, that's excellent. If you can see me, if you could, in the live chat, please mute tell myself. Me. I would appreciate I can hear myself now too. Let me just mute that. We can see and hear you clearly. Okay, great. That is an amazing relief to hear. I've seen faint on audio. Okay, I can bring my microphone closer, and that will probably fix that matter. I hit it over here. Let me bring it a little closer and see if that helps. All right, that's there, that's there, that's there. I'm going to give people a minute or two to get in here before I start. I feel like I should recite some poetry or something, just to be making noise. I guess instead I will say, God, I wish I was in Indianapolis right now. Uh-oh, hang on, I'm getting a notice. All right. It's telling me my stream status is poor, but hopefully that'll take care of itself. I will say that if there is a problem, I am recording this and I'm going to drop it on my podcast, Plot Points Podcast. So if you are having some terrible audio and visual difficulties, this will be available on the Plot Points Podcast sometime in the next month. I'm going to drop everything I cover at Gen Con on the podcast. So if you have issues, I'm recording separately audio, so you can still hear this at least. If there's a problem, that's terrible. But okay, yeah, video is laggy, audio is fine. As long as the audio is fine, you're going to be fine. It's not like I'm going to be holding up amazing, visual aids here. Yeah, anybody else? Every Wednesday night before Gen Con, we go out for steak. Not at St. Elmo's, but at the place next to St. Elmo's. And because we go to get steak next to St. Elmo's every Wednesday night, that's all I could think about last night at Gen Con. Or last night as I was going to bed was, God, this is the first time in years, maybe since 2010, 2011, that I haven't had steak in Indianapolis on a Wednesday in either late July or early August. All right. So when I get rolling, I'm reading in front of me here, so I probably won't see questions on the side. So if you would be so kind as to just wait till the end for your questions. I mean, go ahead and, wait till the end for your questions, because I won't even be looking over there while I'm talking. Two, my understanding is that you have tickets of some sort, and if you could please turn in your tickets, I would appreciate that, so it knows that you were here and watching, etc., etc., etc. And by the clock, I'm going to give people 2 more minutes, then I'm going to start talking. And thank you all for coming and being here. It's vastly appreciated. For you guys and ladies, I hope that this is a fulfilling experience. For me, it's so strange because, you go and you give a presentation, you kind of feed off the audience, and that's just not happening here, which is too bad. All right, sent my ticket. Thank you, Mercury 199 Runner. Take a final sip of tea. All right. I really feel like I should have just be reading poetry to fill this time. All right. A bunch of people are saying they sent their tickets. Thank you. It is 12 o'clock by my watch, so I'm going to roll. So first off, I'm Ben Riggs. I'm a teacher, writer, podcaster. I've written for Geek and Sundry, and you can find more of my madness on the Plot Points podcast. I have a book on role-playing game adventure design called Encounter Theory that's up for an Any and is on sale on DriveThruRPG right now. And that, if you are really interested, is the seminar that we are going to have right now, is about my Encounter Theory. Also, for the last 3 years, I have been writing a book on the sale of TSR to Wizards of the Coast. So after this hour, the next 3 hours are all seminars on TSR and Wizards of the Coast history. So if you're interested, again, I'm going to be streaming it on YouTube Live, so you're more than welcome to come and check those out. And hey, if you know somebody who'd be interested, please feel free to tell them about this and have them come too. It's not like we have a maximum capacity on YouTube Live. The book I have written on this, we're looking for a publisher right now. My agent is Susan Velasquez at the Jabberwocky Literary Agency. If you're a publisher and you think that sounds interesting, she would love to talk to you. I wrote a note to myself here to say that you should turn in your ticket. And people on the stream on YouTube Live are saying that you can turn in your ticket on the event page in the top right corner. If you go to the event page on the top right corner, it says Give Event to Ticket Host. You should be sure to be logged in. Wow. I have never YouTube live streamed before, and having a chat with all of you in it on the right-hand side is incredibly handy. So thank you. All right. Let me begin. So, why are good adventures hard to find? Now, I'm sure if you are in this seminar, you have played role-playing games before. You might have even game master role-playing games before. You might have even written a few adventures of your own. But how many great adventures have you played in? Like, how many great adventures have you run? 20, 10, a handful, 1? And now think about how many years that you've been playing. Oftentimes this would, where I would say, hey, raise your hand if you've already played a game at Gen Con, and now keep your hand up if it was amazing. And typically what happens is 70 to 80% of the hands shoot down. Like a great game is a rare thing. For all the money, time, and thought that we gamers invest in reading, playing, and thinking about games, why aren't we having an excellent time at the table every time we sit down to play? I will almost never play a role-playing game at a convention, even though I go to conventions all the time, because in my experience, most of the time, playing in a con game isn't fun, because the adventure just isn't very good. It isn't very good despite the fact that the game master went through all the trouble of writing an adventure, submitting it to the con, going to the con, and running a game for strangers, only for the players to have just an okay time, and maybe even a miserable one. I've certainly been in miserable con games. At the start of this intensive process, the game master did not sit down and think with enthusiasm, I am going to go to Gen Con, and I am going to run a subpar game. So what happened there? Consider, furthermore, the adventures that often come in the core books of new games. Let's take Vampire the Masquerade 2nd Edition for an example. Now, Vampire was an innovative game that changed role-playing games forever. Yet, the adventure in the core book was an exercise in discouragement, in which the player characters mostly watched other people do things at a party. The team that brought us Vampire was thick with geniuses. There was Lisa Stevens, who is now the publisher at Paizo. You had Mark Reinhagen, who is, again, like most famous for being the Vampire guy who designed Vampire, but he also designed Ars Magica, although Jonathan Tweet pronounces it Magica, so I tend to go with that. Why is it that if you have people like that making a role-playing game, that the adventure they write for their amazing genre-defying role-playing game is not that amazing genre-defying role-playing game isn't good. And I'm going to look over at my stream for a second here just to make sure everything is okay. And turning in tickets. Okay, it looks like everything is still okay. It's, again, my first time on YouTube live stream, so I just want to, and I'm talking to you here, but the stream is there. I just wanted to make sure there wasn't something saying, hey, you've gone offline. It looks like we're still good. Okay. So why is it that even when you have a game made by geniuses, they can't write a good introductory scenario for their brilliant, amazing game? And the reason for that is because no one actually knows what makes a good adventure. Now, there's reasons for that. First of all, the reason no one knows how to write a good adventure is because gaming is new. Now, role-playing games are over 40 as of today, but compared to the hundreds of years that novels have going for them and the thousands of years that people have been writing poetry, gaming is barely out of the NICU. As genius game designer Robin Laws points out, 40 years into the history of cinema is when sound was introduced. And we are just a little bit beyond that in the history of role-playing games. Furthermore, on top of the fact that gaming is new, adventures are just hard to write. They merge technical writing and creative writing. You both need to have a technical grasp of the rules and be able with your writing to inspire someone to run the adventure you write. So again, writing a good adventure is simply a hard thing. It is made harder by the fact that we do not have a theory of adventure design, of role-playing game adventure design. Every time someone sits down to write for publication a role-playing game adventure, they are reinventing the wheel. No one has written an Aristotle's Poetics on how to write adventures, for example. Now I want you also to consider for a moment the challenges of a game of relationships. Well, what's a game of relationships? A game of relationships is a role-playing game where the exploration of relationships is the primary mode of play. I think the most popular relationship games are, again, Vampire and Legend of the Five Rings. Such games just orbit around PC-NPC relationships. If you can say that a good D&D adventure is about creating a dungeon, that advice is of no help to people running Vampire the Masquerade. That said, again, you will see people that have written vampire adventures that are kind of like dungeon crawls, because again, it's a hard thing to do. It's new. One of my goals for sitting down to create a theory of role-playing game adventure design was that it would work for both Dungeons & Dragons and Vampire the Masquerade. So, how do we learn to write good adventures? Well, we're going to look at what works, and then we're going to make a theory. So first, we're going to look at 3 examples of good role-playing game design. I always bring up Ravenloft first, the original adventure written by Tracy and Laura Hickman. It is consistently ranked as one of the greatest Dungeons & Dragons games of all time. And the reason that it is ranked as one of the greatest role-playing game D&D adventures of all time is because it is possessed of brilliant writing. It is replayable. And I think that the structure of Ravenloft is an example of what perfect adventure structure should be, because it gives you total player freedom within a bound. Now, Ravenloft starts out with the cliche, like, you go into a tavern, and oh my god, you need to go to a place and save a kingdom from an evil ruler. You leave the tavern, you go to the kingdom. The minute you cross the gates of the kingdom, Barovia, gates slam shut behind you, and you cannot, for the duration of the adventure, leave the kingdom of Barovia. Now, within Barovia, you can go anywhere, and you can do anything. And because it was written by geniuses Laura Hickman and Tracy Hickman, there are amazing things to do in Barovia. The just going to Castle Ravenloft and going down to the tombs beneath Castle Ravenloft and reading what is written on every grave down there. Laura and Tracy Hickman came up with funny poems for every grave in the tomb of Castle Ravenloft. And because, again, they're geniuses, they're amazingly funny. Furthermore, because the items that you need to complete the adventure are determined by a draw of a card deck, every time you play the game, every time you play the adventure, rather, the items will be in a different location, making it replayable. So again, Ravenloft is just really, really good. If you have not read the original adventure, it's like 30 pages long, and it's a delight to read. And I also like the 5th edition version. The 3rd edition revamp by Bruce Cordell I also thought was pretty good. But if you're going to look at an adventure that other people should emulate in their design, Ravenloft is probably the premier D&D adventure of all time, in my humble opinion. The next adventure I would discuss is the Dracula Dossier campaign for Night's Black Agents. Now, if you're not familiar with Night's Black Agents, it's spies versus vampires. You play the spies. And if you don't know the Dracula Dossier, it is a campaign where spies discover that the novel Dracula is a redacted after-action report filed by British intelligence of a bungled effort to recruit the vampire Dracula in the 1890s. Now, your spies discover this, and Dracula knows that you know, so now Dracula, of course, is going to try and kill your spies because he doesn't want people to know that he exists, and you need to kill Dracula before he kills you. Now, Ken Hite and Gareth Ryder Hanrahan used the novel Dracula as the spine of the greatest role-playing game experience that I have ever had. They started out by adding tens of thousands of words to the novel. Then they also added handwritten notes in the margins of their expanded Dracula. And the handwritten notes are written by other spies who have gone up against Dracula and clearly failed to kill him. In play, your player characters can follow any clue from this novel that Ken Hite and Gareth Ryder Hanrahan have expanded massively, and then, of course, it's an in-game object you give to your players. The level to which they have... there's a note. I'm just going to look to the side here. What does it say? Oh, okay. We're just getting a little buffering. We'll live with that. Okay. In play, you can follow practically any lead from the novel Dracula. There's a Dutch hothouse where Van Helsing gets his garlic. You can go there in the game, and it will somehow be linked to Dracula. If one of your players, when reading the Dracula Dossier, when reading Dracula, notices that the Dutchman Van Helsing always speaks German and wants to follow that up, they will discover that there's a reason for that. He's a spy for the Kaiser. Van Helsing is a spy. Now, all of this probably sounds amazing, but the thing that makes the Dracula Dossier even better is it's a dream to run. Because of the layout and writing, it runs like a dream at the table. You don't need to read tens and tens and tens and thousands of words and keep it all in your head at one time. The organization of the campaign is just fantastic. The writing is such a blending of reality and fiction that it creates this first-of-a-kind tabletop experience where Wikipedia actually becomes a tool of table play. My players would find clues in Dracula, and then they would go researching them on the internet. And because, again, Hite and Ryder Hanrahan have done their research, there will be clues that you can follow up even on Wikipedia. Lastly, I wanted to bring up City of Lies by Greg Stolze. It's one of the few good adventures for one of the greatest games of relationship of all time, Legend of the Five Rings. In City of Lies, you're essentially FBI agents in samurai Las Vegas. There are plots, there's opium, smuggling, deception. Hey, but you're FBI agents, so you have the power to cut through all of that and get down to the meat of things. It's absolutely fantastic. So, what do we learn by looking at successful adventures? What can you learn about role-playing game adventure design? What it comes down to is adventures are about encounters. A session of a role-playing game is nothing but a series of encounters where player characters interact with the setting and characters. Ultimately, there are only two activities player characters engage in during adventure. Everything is either an interaction with the setting or an interaction with another character. This is a knife which can be used to make adventures better. For example, you will find an awful lot of adventures that have extensive history and background. Those things are probably unnecessary in a role-playing game adventure because if it doesn't come out at the table, there's no point in having it. Player handouts. Those are great. Player handouts make encounters better. If you find a dead, again, like the Dracula Dossier proves, hey, the entire novel Dracula is an in-game artifact, and you can use that in-game. Putting the encounter first in adventure design leads to 4 principles of good adventure design, in my opinion. Principle 1. Face the player and free the player. As a play is written for the audience, so an adventure is written... let me say that again. As a play is written for an audience, so an adventure is written for its players. The greatest advantage of the role-playing game adventure over movies and literature is that the players can interact with the world and the characters. Therefore, good encounters should present players with foes to murder, secrets to discover, allies to save, treasure to loot, rituals to enact, and ruins to explore. If something is not able to interact with players, it should be cut from the adventure. A thumbnail test of a good encounter is simply listing all the different ways a player might interact with setting and non-player characters in that encounter. An encounter should be written so that players can create their own fun with the tools provided by the adventure writer. The enjoyment of an encounter is almost never where the adventure writer thinks it will be. A good adventure never assumes what a player will do. Interactivity is the holy grail of adventure design. 2. Problems, not solutions. Problems, not solutions. I'm going to look at the stream and make sure everything's okay. Okay. I think everything is okay. Number 2, problems and not solutions. Quite simply, it is the job of the adventure writer to present players with the most interesting, difficult, terrifying, and dangerous problems imaginable, but not tell them how to solve it. Players do not come to the table to watch their characters drink tea and eat a 7-course meal prepared by a celebrity chef. Players come to the table asking to be treated roughly. They expect assassination attempts, poisonings, betrayals, and monsters bursting out of the rock of the earth to swallow them whole. Good encounters present engaging, consequential, and often deadly problems which it is up to the characters to solve. It is not up to the adventure writer to solve them. An adventure should never rely on player characters resolving a problem a certain way, as this can derail the adventure and violates the principle of player facing and player freedom, as such encounters no longer allow players to solve a problem in their own way. This does raise questions. If players are allowed to solve problems in any fashion, how can an adventure writer ever write more than one encounter at a time? 3. The dungeon as adventure structure. The dungeon as adventure structure. Imagine a dungeon. Whether or not your mental dungeon has a dragon at the end of it is up to you. The dungeon has an entrance through which player characters enter. Once within the dungeon, the player characters hold freedom to move about its halls and rooms within the limits of the setting and the rules. They descend its levels, working towards an ultimate confrontation with a big bad at the end. Even if the adventure writer is not writing a dungeon crawl, the basic structure of encounters should still be structured like a dungeon. There is a first encounter in which the player characters receive a call to adventure. The prince of the city wants them dead. A professor of archaeology has been murdered at Miskatonic University. The Empire is constructing a battle station with enough power to destroy an entire planet, etc., etc. The call to adventure delivers information about the plot, gives the characters motivation if they don't already have it, and provides leads to other encounters. It is the door to our structural dungeon. Once the player characters embark on their adventure, they should have freedom to move between encounters in the same way that player characters in a dungeon have freedom to explore. If you are not designing a dungeon crawl, the player characters will be exploring the narrative space of your encounters instead of the architectural space of a dungeon. In a game of relationship, players explore relationships between characters. So, how does an adventure writer organize and plan for what player characters might do in choosing among a large number of encounters? Leads are used to help structure an adventure. A lead is an answer to the question, what in this encounter might lead player characters to another encounter? Imagine a player character encounters a band of kobolds in a dungeon. They kill the kobolds and rob their bodies of their meager possessions. They find a few rusty daggers, 5 copper pieces, and a wooden buckler. All well and good. Now imagine, they also find a note saying that the kobolds kidnapped the burgomeister's daughter and demand 5 cows ransom, or they will flay the flesh from her pretty bones. Now imagine they also find a secret passage, one which leads up, not down, and is of clearly elvish construction, unlike the dim and hideous kobold caverns they've been exploring. These last 2 details are leads. They drive the characters forward to new encounters. They also function in play as rewards for overcoming challenges. This is why handouts are very powerful leads. Still, something as humble as a hallway stretching to the right and the left also functions as a lead. You will notice that receiving the leads was not dependent on how the player characters defeated the kobolds, nor do the leads assume which way the player characters will go. Player freedom is still maintained. That said, leads allow adventure writers to create encounters and structure an adventure through multiple encounters. Encounters should lead from one to another, building up to a climax. An encounter with a foe which brings the adventure to a resolution. Like the call to adventure, this encounter is likely inevitable, and the adventure writer can thusly spend more time and care preparing it than they might an encounter with a barkeep. The climax is bigger, more dangerous, and consequently, more fun. In a dungeon crawl, the climax is obviously the confrontation with the foul foe lurking in the dungeon's center. In an investigative scenario, the climax is likely a confrontation with the criminal behind the mystery. Using the dungeon as metaphor for adventure, starting with a call to adventure, letting player characters make choices by following leads, and ending with a climax allows the adventure writer to create an architecture of encounters for player characters to explore while allowing them freedom and choice. 4. Playable sensory-specific description. Let me take a sip of tea and check to make sure everything's okay. Uh-oh. I think we're okay. All right. 4. Playable sensory-specific description. Description is the foundation of the shared experience of a game session. Successful description in an adventure paints a picture with words, while at the same time conveying important information. Description presents a challenge in an adventure because a role-playing game session is foggy. It is difficult to present a clear picture at all times of what is happening in the game, and it is possible for the picture of what is happening in the head of the game master to be much different from that in the minds of her players, leading to misunderstandings. Therefore, in a game session, it is better for a game master to give too much information as opposed to too little. However, the wise adventure writer must restrict their description of a given encounter. because describing an encounter in complete detail would turn every encounter into James Joyce's Ulysses. The adventure writer should include a description of the encounter for the game master to present to players. This should be playable description. Any setting or character information that would provoke interaction from the player characters should be included in the description of the encounter. The girl has a knife. There is blood on the mirror. The bear is sleeping. Such description presents opportunities for player-character interaction and should therefore be included in description. Also, the adventure writer should include description which appeals to the five senses with specific words that paint a picture of the encounter. What do they smell, see, taste, touch, hear, feel in the encounter? As for specific, consider it's cold versus the beer froze. Same idea, but the second description is definitely stronger. After a description covers those bases, the adventure writer should stop writing description. Anything else the player characters might ask their game master about the encounter is by definition unimportant. Because if it was important, it should have already been added. So the game master can generate those details on her own without any fear. So, how does one take all this and apply it to a game that you are running or a game that you are writing? I have created over a dozen play plans. I call them play plans because calling them worksheets sounds really grade school, so I called them play plans. They are for both publication and home use. I have created play plans for fantasy, horror, investigative games, and games of relationship. These play plans are released under the Creative Commons license, so you could use them for free if you wanted to use them in an adventure that you are publishing. I have posted them on both... I posted an example play plan... And I cannot talk. An example play plan on both Twitter and Facebook. On Twitter, I am at @BenRiggs_, and on Facebook, I am Benjamin Riggs. In Facebook, it's posted publicly, so if you click on my profile on Facebook, you'll see the play plan example first. Again, I'm at @BenRiggs_ on Twitter, and it's also the last thing I posted on Twitter, because I'm going to go over my basic play plan right now. And you may find it useful to actually have it on your screen while I'm talking so you know what I'm speaking of when I say these things. So I'm going to give you a second to go get them if you want them. Some of you have excellent names on Facebook. I especially love Lichcasts. That's a great name. All right. I'm going to give you 5 more seconds. All right, I'm going to assume that if you were like, I really want to look at the play plan while you're talking, that you went and got it. So first, you want to start with a title and a summary that leaves nothing out. And again, you want to leave nothing out so that the GM can, at the table, just look at that right away. Apparently there are a lot of Benjamin Riggses on Facebook. Which Benjamin Riggs am I? I'm in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, so hopefully that helps. I'm the Benjamin Riggs in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, if you're looking for the play plan on Facebook. Hopefully that cuts down on the chatter. I do know that there is a winemaker in Australia that shares my name and a choir master in Colorado that shares my name, but I didn't think there were that many of us other than that. All right. And if you're having problems with Facebook, it should be really easy to find me on Twitter. I'm at @BenRiggs_. So the first thing you want to do when you're filling out your play plan is you want to start with a title and summary that leaves nothing out. You want to provide a really playable description of the encounter so that if the GM, they'll read the adventure once before they run it, sure, but when they get to the adventure, they don't want to have to reread everything to get the gist of what's going on. So you want a really tight summary that has the most important stuff in it. Then you have the setting with specific granular detail, leaving nothing out even if you're repeating yourself. And again, I find it easy that way when I'm GMing to just dip into that box of description and describe the encounter. Beneath that are game master characters or non-player characters, depending on your nomenclature. The non-player character, whether human, monstrous, or animal, should be described below that. I give every non-player character a goal to give them motivation in the scene, a personality to make them real to the players, and a look that can be described. No matter how humble the non-player character, if they are important to the scene, they should be described thusly. If the non-player character appears in more than one encounter, in this age of PDFs, the adventure writer should simply repeat the information for the non-player character again, noting changes in italics. Bottom of the play plan, you're going to have notes and you're going to have leads. Notes, anything else that you think is important can go there. Changes in the rules, important reminders, fun details, etc. And leads, again, are encounters that other PCs might be led to from this one. What links this encounter to those encounters? Well, a lead may be as concrete as a piece of paper reading Aaron Andres of 132 North 77th Street is... all right. I'm going to check the feed. All right. Looks like people found stuff. Thank you, Samuel Tyler, for posting a link to my Twitter. That would have been a smart thing for me to paste in there. But the computer that is running the live cast, I am paranoid about. I'm afraid it's a little fragile. And I'm afraid that the computer running the live cast is a little fragile. And I'm terrified to open up another application on it, lest it break down in some way, shape, or form. So, if you find all of that interesting, my book where I expound on this in detail and give over a dozen play plans to help you plan adventures either for publication or home use is on DriveThruRPG right now. It is on sale for the week. It is also nominated for an Ennie tomorrow night, so if I win, you might be, and you attend digitally the ceremony, you'll see me talk again. But this is where I usually break it down and ask for questions. So I'm going to ask for questions in the YouTube stream, and I will look over here. And yeah, on my end, it also said that it got really lagged. Hopefully it has rectified itself. If you think I need to repeat anything I just said, please let me know. But other than that, I'm just going to look over here for questions. I'll send a link to Facebook. Sure, let me talk about the NPC thing again. And then I'll get to Oak, Slotgraf, and the person who asked for a link, if you scroll up in the chat, there was a link to my Twitter feed, and hopefully you should be able to click from that, no problem. And let me know if that is not a sufficient solution. And I'll read the bit on Game Master characters and non-player characters again. And then I'll answer all these questions. So any non-player character or Game Master character, whether human, monstrous, or animal, should be described in that section of the play plan. Every non-player character, I always give them a goal to give them motivation in a scene. I give them a personality to make them real to the players, and I give them a look that can be described. No matter how humble the non-player character, if they are important to the scene, they should be described in there. If the non-player character appears in more than one encounter in this age of PDFs, the adventure writer should simply repeat the information for the NPC again, noting the changes in italics. And now I'm going to go back to questions because a bunch just popped up. All right. Does this method work for larger scale plots? I would say yes, and here is why. Also in the book Encounter Theory, I provide a sample adventure written using the play plans. I made it for D&D 5th edition because, of course, that is the way that most people play role-playing games is D&D 5th edition, so I figured the example should be from that. So if you want to see and I want to say it's a 30-page adventure. It's definitely enough for 1 to 3 nights of play. As for longer plots, I believe that this would work because I think that this is what the Dracula Dossier does. And I ran the Dracula Dossier twice, and I ran it... Each time it was about 20 sessions. And the way the Dracula Dossier is organized is... All right, so again, the novel Dracula is kind of the spine. It is your data set. In the same way that in Ravenloft, you cannot leave Barovia, Dracula performs that same function in the Dracula Dossier. So it's your bounded set. You cannot go beyond it. I mean, you could, but you're not going to find any vampire stuff there, so why would you? And they wrote encounters based on things in the book. So again, if you wanted to go to the hothouse in the Netherlands where Van Helsing got his garlic, you can do that. So, and again, when they wrote it, they were like, well, now here are the encounters that happen to you when you go to the garlic house. So given how incredibly successful I thought the Dracula Dossier was, that was one of the examples that really inspired me to come up with this theory. It should work for longer campaigns because the leads will just keep carrying you through. I would love to see, maybe that's what I should do when I finish my TSR history book is sit down and write a city book for D&D 5th edition using, that would be a ton of, something like Towless. How do you write Towless in this style is an interesting question. All right, moving down my list. How do you know when you have hit the end of the necessary part of the description? Could you please talk about that a little more? You have